You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as a producer, as a songwriter, and as the drummer for the multi-platinum and Juno award-winning band Finger 11. So welcome to the podcast, Steve Molella. Steve, how are you, and how good does it feel to be back on the road playing live shows after a lengthy hiatus because of all these pesky lockdowns?
Well, Joel, thanks for that intro. Yeah, it feels good, man. It was that was way too long. Even just, it's great to play shows again, obviously, but just kind of hanging with the guys again, right? There's that whole sort of family feeling that we have with that band, like when we're on the road together, hanging out before and after the shows. It feels good to get a dose of that again. So,
and for a lot of bands, a lot of musicians, it was almost like a 2-year period with no shows. In your case, it was almost 3. Wasn't it like a year leading up to the pandemic? You guys were more focused on writing,
because
on new music.
You can never predict, especially a pandemic coming up. So we were focusing on new music. We were taking a bunch of these cottage trips. We'd go away for like 4 nights and just, compile a bunch of new songs, new demos, and then come back home for a bit, and then a couple months later go back, and then with hopes that we would start touring again and then cut a new record, and then all of a sudden the pandemic happens, and then we that's 2 years, and then after that, once everything kind of opened up, we were trying to find the right show. We were noticing once everything kind of got back, it was like that stop start thing, because people were booking shows, but then they'd get canceled. Book shows and then they would never happen, right? Because it was always like that lockdown and then just kidding and then back and forth, right? So we waited till things were actually like open that we wouldn't have to cancel on our fans or anything like that. So when we finally got, which was good, like a hometown show, hometown for the guys where they grew up in Burlington. So
yeah, I feel for your fans, because, it's been a long time since the last album came out. Yeah. Fans get wind that, before the pandemic, you guys are starting to write again. There's that light at the end of the tunnel. And then a global pandemic pushes that back another 2 or 3 years. So you guys have diehard fans. I see them online. Everyone's excited. And maybe we can dive into that in a little bit. You actually, after this interview, you're heading to Soundcheck. You actually have a show tonight. And this episode actually launches in a few hours today. So even when people hear this, it'll be tonight. So this is Maxwell's in Waterloo. And you guys are playing with I Mother Earth, another legendary Canadian band.
Love those guys. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I've seen the last few shows. So you had a Toronto show, you had an Ottawa show, both of those sold out. And the last time I checked for Maxwell's, tickets were 80-90% sold out. So man, the fans are coming out. What does that mean to you after all these years? The fans are just still showing that love and support.
It's awesome, man. I'm as happy as we are to play the shows. And I can speak for the rest of the guys, we're happier for the fans that they get to enjoy that again, right? Like a lot of people, including myself, you want something to do, right? You want something to look forward to. So you buy a ticket, you have that thing where in a month from now or 2 months from now, you get to like go out with your friends and enjoy one of your favorite bands and sing along to your favorite songs. And that got, as much as, us, like the artist got that stripped away from us, the fans got it stripped away too, right? So we're happy for them that they get to enjoy that again. So
yeah, so I was there for the Ottawa show recently, and I brought out 2 friends that knew Finger 11, liked Finger 11 songs, but they had never seen the band live, and the 3 of us were just losing our minds in the crowd. So it was
a fun
awesome.
show too.
It was a lot of fun, and we'll dive into that a little later on, because there's a lot we can talk about that show. So I I like to start off the podcast by sharing with our listeners how I actually know the guests. So I'm all about networking and building community and fostering relationships. So in our case, it goes back to about a year ago. I had done a 2.5 hour deep dive interview with your bandmate, Rick Jacket from Finger 11. And I spend a week promoting each episode. So you got tagged over and over again. It was probably like spam to you, but keeping you.
Oh, it's good. I watched. I mean, it was good watching parts of that interview too.
Yeah. So keeping you in the loop. So that's probably the first time that knew I existed anyways. And then a few months later, you had watched the David Bottrell episode, super producer David Bottrell, who's worked with Tool and Peter Gabriel and everyone. You just said, hey, love that interview. And then a few months ago, I had Finger 11's not original drummer, because they had one before that, but Rich Bedeau, who played on,
I watched that one too. That was awesome, man.
Yeah, so Rich played on 4 of the Finger 11 albums, and you actually, it's the first time we communicated. You sent me a message and just said, I love the interview. I loved the insight. I loved his positivity. I loved his side of the story. And you said it made me so happy to see him doing so well. So I thought that was amazing to hear you say that, because, in the industry, sometimes there's egos and grudges and these things. And I thought that meant, that meant a lot to me. And I thought that was amazing. And I talked to Rich a lot, and I shared with him that you had kind words, and it meant a lot to him. And I wanted to kick this off powerfully. So I actually got Rich Bedeau to help me out here. So he sent in some kind words. So this is from former Finger 11 drummer, Rich Bedeau. This is what he says. He wrote a lot, so hang tight here. He said, I only met Steve briefly many years back. I was helping out a young country star and went to his parents' house to have her do some vocals on a song of his, I believe. I remember him being quite passionate about things and could tell Arnold Lanny had been a wonderful mentor to him. When I heard he was then playing shows with my former bandmates, I had a bitter taste in my mouth. With anyone associated with them, like they were the enemy. Well, a lot has changed in my life since that time, as you know. I now find a true sense of pride in the Finger 11 legacy and watching Steve play the songs with the guys. It brings me nothing but positive feelings. He's a fantastic drummer and brings beautiful new energy to the band. Along with his playing, Steve is a great producer and all-around musician. He communicates the language of songs beautifully. I got nothing but love for Steve, and I'm so very proud of you and all your achievements. I can see how great a man you are, and I wish you much success. I will always be cheering you on as your biggest supporter. I can't wait to see all the things you have in store with both Finger 11 and otherwise. God bless you, and thanks for not messing up my parts. LOL, just kidding. All the best, and very Merry Christmas to you and your family. So that's from Rich Bedeau, former Finger 11 drummer. So
that's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. I got to reach out to him. Yeah, I mean, like you said before, me sharing those words with him after your podcast. No one wants to see anybody go through anything. You know what I mean? You always want to root for not just a fellow musician, but a friend, right? Even somebody you just met, for that matter. But I did meet Rich. It's funny, I met Rich first, like you had mentioned. It was with this country artist, and so we hung out a few times. And I remember asking Rich, hey, because remember, I started off as a huge fan of the band, right? So I remember asking Rich, hey, when are you guys gonna get back on the road, or play some shows, new music, and like that? And I guess at that time it was they were going through their thing, right? So and I'm sure we'll get into obviously the story of how I joined and stuff, but he was just he was a good guy. And watching that podcast he did, and I watched the whole thing, just seeing his view and where he's at now, and I am really happy for him. So I got to reach out to him. That was really kind of him to say those words.
Yeah, I thought on both of your parts, between your words and his words, that it showed, a lot of maturity and a lot of character. And when Rich and I, we talk pretty frequently, and he had mentioned that, having someone else have your role in the band, it's like an ex-girlfriend, where it's 100%.
I was honestly just going to say that.
It's over, it's for the best. but seeing someone else there with the ex-girlfriend, there's still a part of you that feels like, there's still something there, even though it shouldn't be there. So that's the best example him and I could come up with. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's very nice of him.
And so let's, people look at you today and they see this successful drummer, successful songwriter and producer. I like to go all the way back to the beginning, because we have a lot of young musicians paying attention, and they see kind of the final product. Even though you have a lot of great stuff on the way, there's still growth, but people see a final product and say, oh man, he's had so much success. I could never, be that good of a drummer, or I could never achieve what he's achieved. And I like to show people that, man, we all started in diapers with no skills, and it was a lot of hard work and dedication and vision and support from others. So let's take it back to the beginning. When you think back to when you were super young, do you have an earliest musical memory? Where does this love of music come from? Does something stand out to you?
It starts way back. My dad, a lot of these stories of how things came to be is all rooted from my dad. He was always touring in bands, drumming, right? And so when I was in diapers, I'd be at my parents' house in the basement, and the band would be rehearsing here till like whatever, midnight, 10 o'clock at night. So I'm just there and I'm just kind of taking it all in, right? And they were really, really, really good musicians, these guys. So I was always around music, always, right? So that's kind of where it started. That was my first, I guess, musical memory, would be being played live right in front of me. And you start learning, my dad was always very, he would always push, don't just listen as a listener. This is as I started getting a little older. It'd be, pick out the harmonies that everyone's doing, pick out the rhythm patterns, the time signatures, and this and that. So when we'd be in the car and I'd be singing along to the song, and I'd be singing the lead, and he'd be like, why are you singing the lead for? Like, it's already done. Sing a harmony that either isn't there, or pick out a harmony that's in the song, or write a counter melody. And you're like 9 years old, you just want to enjoy, living on a prayer or something like that. It's just like, but so that's sort of where it stems from. A lot of it stems from my dad and my brother as well, older brother. We toured in a band together, and he's got an incredible ear as well. So that's where it starts from.
So people know you as a drummer, but behind you, there's guitars, there's basses. I've seen videos of you working with other musicians, and you're playing a bass or you're playing guitar. So were drums the first instrument?
Drums are the first instrument. Yeah. When I was 2, my dad would hold me up because I couldn't reach the pedal yet. Right. So he just kind of hold me up and on the kit, and I'd be playing. And I remember, at least I can't remember this because I was 4 years old, but my dad would tell me the first groove I learned how to play was Billie Jean by Michael Jackson, which is the most common 2 and 4 drum beat you can learn. So I was always around drums first for a while, right through elementary school and high school. I had bands, and then I picked up guitar when I was maybe 17. It's a little later. And the reason I did that was because I was playing in a band, and the songs, I guess, I came to learn that the songs weren't that great. So we would send them around. People were like, it's kind of cool, but songs aren't really there. So I was like, shit, we gotta write some better songs. Well, I'm like, well, I can't write songs on drums. Unless it's like We Will Rock You or something like that. But other than that, 99% of the songs are written with, something with a tone. So I picked up guitar. And I had a really good friend of mine that was an incredible guitar player, and he taught me the basics, I guess, and then I kind of just took it from there. So yeah, I play guitar, bass, drums, sing. But again, I have a circle of people that play all these instruments better than I do. So whenever I'm in the studio, I'll call on them to give their professional talent to me.
And who would you say were your biggest drumming influences growing up? Were there people already you were looking out, and there's like the great drummers that inspired you to practice and take lessons and get better?
Yeah. Well, I started off before any like rock or pop. I grew up on funk because that was my dad, like with his band, like kind of a funk band. And so like David Garibaldi, for example, from Tower of Power, that was like the first guy that looked up to. Or Dave Weckl, he's like a just a, he's one of the best drummers in the world, technical, kind of jazzy, whatever. And then from there, it was Dave Grohl for me. That's when I knew songs were integral to what I do and what I gravitated towards, right? It wasn't just like, while everybody else was like, Neil Peart and these guys, which is they're incredible, but it was always Dave Grohl, Travis Barker. They made music with their drums. Like they wrote hooks with their drums. You know what I mean? And they played to the songs so well, and they wrote the catchiest drum beats, right? So like, Smells Like Teen Spirit, that iconic drum intro. It's like, as simple as it is, that's one of the most iconic drum intros in rock music, right? So I'd say Dave Grohl, Travis Barker for me.
Yeah, I would say those are two of the greatest drummers of our generation.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Just crazy talent.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, was there anything that you wanted to be growing up before you decided, maybe I want to be a musician full time? Any like kid dreams of like playing in the NHL or being a fireman?
Playing in the NHL.
Something?
It started off as I play hockey since I was 4 years old. I was in skates, so I play rep hockey, and you always have that. There's always like that, that part that you reach where, man, I'm a really good hockey player. I'm scoring all these goals. It's like you automatically think when you're young, and then it's like,
oh, NHL. For sure, NHL, yeah. Right?
So then you realize you start getting old enough. It's like, oh, these other players in the league are so much better than I am, right? So there went that. I got into golf heavily. Addicted to the game, still am. I don't play as much because I'm super busy, but when I was younger, I got into golf, and I started playing really well, and I had a golf coach, and I worked at, when I was 16, I worked at a golf store and a golf camp and a golf course, so I can get cheap clubs and free golf, right? It's an expensive sport. You're 16, 17, and you want to play every day. So that's what I did there. And, so it turned into, now I want to make the PGA Tour. Right. And my scores got pretty low. I was playing in tournaments and competitive. But then from there, with the band that I was playing with, we started going on tour a bunch. So then it's like, oh, I could do this because I'm actually, making money at this, and I can, then I started, writing songs and producing records just like in a small room in a basement, right? And then from there, that took the focus, because I noticed that I started getting busy and meeting the right people. So now golf and hockey are both hobbies of mine, which I still play from time to time.
So you mentioned going on tour with some bands. Our listeners love when I ask our guests if they played in any bands growing up, and if so, what are some of the names of the bands? They love hearing these names of the bands, because sometimes there's some ridiculous.
The names are the best because they're so ridiculous. So I was 15 when I joined a band. They were already a band. They were looking for a drummer, and I was 15. And a friend of mine, he said, "Hey, I have a friend of a friend that's looking for a drummer. They're in a band." They were called The Fifth. Okay, so they were The Fifth, and then The Fifth sort of turned into new members. I got my brother in the band, and that friend of mine that I said had taught me guitar, I got him in the band. Then that was called Simmer. Simmer was the band name. From Simmer turned into Afternoon Zero, which was one band, and then from
the names are all pretty good so far.
They're not bad. They're not bad.
All pretty
and
good so far.
Then from there, I went into the Balconies, who you know very well. And then from the Balconies was Finger Eleven. So it wasn't like, I had 30 bands or something like that, but that was the evolution, I guess, when I was 15.
Yeah, I sent you a message when I found out you were in the Balconies. Being from Ottawa, when I was in my teens, like, I don't know, 16, 17, 18, 19, I used to play shows, and I was in vocal competitions and battle of the bands with Jackie from the Balconies. Back then they were called Jackie in the Kitchen, which is a horrible name. And years later, when I moved to Toronto, I find there's the Balconies band that's doing great things, signed to a label. I think they're working with Arnold, right? They were Coalition.
That's how I met them. Yep.
Okay. And they were, I was like, oh my God, like one of us made it. This is amazing. And they were so good. And I actually went out to see them live, and you might actually, they were the 3-piece where she's like related to one or both of them or whatever. So actually that was before you, but yeah, I go way back to my teens with Jackie in the Kitchen and the Balcony. So it was awesome to see the success that they had. And it was so cool to see that you actually were playing with them for a few years.
Yeah, that's when I was already with Arnold, Lanny, the producer. So he had said, hey, I'm working with this band called The Balconies. I'd love to get you part of this project. So we did it. I was already living in California at the time. I was there for 5 years, and Balconies rolls through. And what started off as just kind of like, helping out on the album, to then drumming on the album, because it was this weird dynamic. There was the 3 of them, right? It was Jackie, who was singing and playing guitar. Her brother Steve was the bass player, and Liam was the drummer. Liam's a crazy talented dude. He's actually we found out, and I'm sure he'll tell you this, he was a way better guitar player than he was a drummer. He was a good drummer, but he was a phenomenal guitar player. One of my favorite guitar players I've played with. And while we were in the studio, Arnold was like, hey, Liam can like play guitar really well. I'm like, yeah, like really well. He's like, so why don't you play the drums in this record? And Liam plays guitar. That way Jackie can just focus on vocals. Like, she doesn't have to play guitar in the sound. Like, it doesn't need to be her. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. So we pitched that to them. They went for it. And then, so that turned on to me drumming and then sort of co-producing it with Arnold. I was in one room tracking and he was in another room tracking. He had like a studio A and studio B. And then it was like, hey, we got offered a tour to go to Europe for a month with Rival Sons. I was like, oh, good luck. And they're like, yeah, you got to come on the road. Like, this is the new, formation that we're going to go with. So I was like, okay, fine. It's one tour. So I tell Arnold, I'm like, okay, Arnold, I'll be back in like 3.5 weeks or something like that. But then after this tour, you guys got to get a drummer. Like, I'm done with touring. Like, I'm doing this now. This is why I'm in California, make records. And then 1 month turned into 3 years. So I was with them for 3 years, on and off of touring. And I would always go back to California. Right. And then go back. And then we got more tours and did Europe and then did Iceland. And it was amazing. It took me to some incredible parts of the world. And it was just so fun to play with. They're all very talented. Jackie's incredibly talented. She's just an amazing front woman and songwriter, guitar player, just everything. Like, one of the best performers. So that's how the evolution of me with the Balconies, what started off as just like assisting Arnold, turned into drumming and then co-producing it, and then, being in the band for 3 years.
Yeah, you never know when you say yes to something where it's going to lead, right? You can only look back and see where all the dots.
And it was at that point where you don't want to say no to any opportunity. That's how you create a name for yourself, and that's how you develop your own craft, right? So that's you never want to turn anything down, because you don't know where it could lead. Because when I auditioned with Finger 11, again, I'm sure we'll get into that, they had come out to a balcony show to see me, and that sort of sold it for them, right? You do an audition, then they come out to a live show, and they're like, okay, yeah, this is going to work. So if I hadn't stayed, I didn't really have a band to play with to sort of showcase what I do live. So I guess that everything happens for a reason.
That's awesome. Yeah, their single "Do It in the Dark" was like my favorite song when that came out. Man, that was when I saw that to me, that was like, okay, they've made it. Like, that is like a perfect rock pop song. The music video is awesome. Sonically, like, the actual recording was as good as anything else. To me, that song was like the epitome of the band reaching their full potential.
And I feel like, maybe you feel the same way about this. I actually feel like the Balconies were a little bit early, like ahead of everything that's going on, because you see bands like say like the Beaches or Wet Leg or anything like that. It's like the balcony. Like, I'm not saying that, you know, Jackie was first like doing that, but that was at a time where it's like, was that 5 years too early for
Like
that?
the female fronted rock.
With those kind of songs, yeah, with that indie sort of, you know,
Yeah.
grungy pop rock songs, right? Uh,
And the balconies were as good as any of the bands you just named.
that's
Like
what I mean.
they
And
were,
like they were,
yeah.
and I believe that. And Jackie, as good as a performer as anybody, you can't go on after her. Like that's a very, very, very tough job if you're going on after Jackie.
Yeah, and I almost didn't recognize her when I saw the band in Toronto, thinking back to when we were teenagers, and it was more like, you know, really like pop covers, and
Yeah,
they weren't that heavy yet, and she wasn't that, you know, like rock god up front.
right.
So
Yeah,
so that's kind of cool.
and she fit right into that role.
So let's go back a few years. If I met you at 12 years old,
Yeah.
who am I meeting?
Oh, you're meeting a guy who wanted to play in the NHL at 12 years old, pretty
That's where
much,
you
right?
were.
Yeah.
Were you outgoing? Were you shy?
Yeah,
Did
always. I
you?
think it was always an extroverted, outgoing dude. Always. Yeah. I would
Okay.
be at that. I guess I would be road hockey every single day, right? After school, it's like get home, backpack away, uh, back out to the schoolyard, road hockey, back home, dinner, you know, schoolyard, back home, road hockey. It was almost every day, which it's crazy. Like I don't see that anymore. I drive around, I see none of that.
Now it's home from school, iPad,
100%.
eat,
Yeah. And it's
video
not saying that
games, bed.
it is what it is. Like that's just what today is. And I'm sure these kids are learning a ton. They're definitely more technologically advanced than we ever were growing up. But that's who you would meet. You would meet a excited, uh, you know, fun-loving kid that just wanted to play hockey and just hang out with friends.
Yeah, we're pretty similar at 12. Now at 16, if you and I were friends at 16 and you invited me over to your place to play some music for me,
Yeah.
what albums would you be spinning at 16?
Tip for sure. Finger 11.
So this is like 98-ish, 97, 98, or
I guess. Yeah, I guess it would be around there. Make yourself. Uh,
Incubus?
Make yourself Incubus. When did that come out? 97. That came out, right?
Make Yourself?
Yeah.
That was closer to the 2000s because Drive was one of the biggest songs of 2001 with It's Been a While and with How You Remind Me.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure. Science from Incubus came out in like
Science was 95, was it not?
I gotta
say Make Yourself was 97. It has to be 97 because
I-
Morning View came out 2000. Man, we got to figure this out. We hold on.
Okay.
Yeah.
You keep talking about albums and I'll check real quick. But
Go ahead.
Science I thought was like 98, and I thought Make Yourself was closer to 2000. Because Incubus was on the Family Values tour playing Science, and that was like 98.
Okay.
Anyways, if you can think of any other albums you'd be listening to, I'll double check.
I'd say Naveed, OLP. Yeah. You jamming that. White Pony, Deftones.
Great drum sounds on that one.
Oh,
I talked about that in the last episode with Jordan Gauthier.
Incredible. Like phenomenal. And I love the fact that the tones are all, they spent so much time. Nothing was like sample replace. Like they spent so much time getting those drum tones, where now modern rock, it's like literally the same samples that mixers are throwing into the songs, right?
Yeah.
Back then it was like spending a day getting a certain snare tone, or, you know, tuning the toms to the track, and everything was by design. And yeah, that White Pony album was phenomenal.
So I'd say so Make Yourself was 1999. So we're both right.
There you
it's
go.
Like in
there you
between.
go, right in the middle.
You're saying 98. I'm saying 2000.
Oh, and Science was 96, correct?
I'd have to check real quick.
Gotta be, yeah.
It's very important that we get our details right here. So discography, 97 for Science.
97, okay.
So, but with the singles, so Science, you're thinking 96. Well, they probably released the first single early in 96 and the album comes out in
Maybe, yeah.
97.
Yeah,
And then with Make Yourself, even though it comes out in 99, they had, Pardon Me as a
Pardon Me.
single, then
Yep.
Stellar. And by
Yep.
the time they release Drive, they're in early 2001, which is what I'm saying for the
There
album.
you
So
go. Yeah,
we're
yeah.
both
So I
right.
mean,
Can we agree to
there
disagree
we go.
here?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was yeah, I remember I got my brother turned me on to Incubus when I saw Pardon Me, that video. I was in high school and I was like, oh man, this is the coolest band. Like they took like, obviously like the new metal, but mixed it with like, he sounds like Mike Patton from Faith No More and like Chili Peppers, and they put it all in one. That's what made me go back and listen to Science. And then you hear those tracks like Certain Shade of Green or Glass and New Skin, and it's like, oh my God, this band's phenomenal. That was my favorite band growing up. I'd say Incubus was my favorite band growing up. So and that turned me on to the whole new metal scene, right? With all those bands like Deftones and Soundgarden was, yeah, I guess we would always jam that. Pearl Jam, obviously. Like if you wanted to jam rock songs when you were in your teens, you're definitely playing, Pearl Jam, and you're playing Soundgarden.
Yeah, Incubus, the musicians in that band are so talented, and
that's, I think, that's what I gravitated towards, right? Because I came again, I think, because of the funk background that I grew up on, and then watching them playing a bunch of funk in rock music. Phenomenal musicians.
And you mentioned Pardon Me. Nothing sounded like Pardon Me when that came out, I think, which was part of the appeal.
Yeah, it's those verses that he's kind of doing his rap thing with funk bass, and then the chorus are just open up as like heavy as hell. Phenomenal band. I was a fan of them for a while, I guess, for a bunch of albums.
So I have to give credit to two of my best friends, so Selge and Eric, because my whole life since we were, I don't know, 14, their favorite bands have been Incubus and Finger 11. So they were the ones that got me into it. And I remember they were spinning Science when it first came out and Make Yourself. Because of them, like I've seen Incubus twice, I've seen Finger 11, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. So I have to give them credit, and they love that I've almost interviewed the whole Finger 11 band at this point. So they love seeing their friend, doing the deep dives. How early on did you know that you had something special to offer as a musician, and that this is actually something you could do as a career?
I mean, it's hard to say, because everybody has their support group. Whether you're talented or not, you got your family and friends saying, you're awesome, you're amazing. It's like, and you believe it, right? So I think the time where I actually knew, because like, you don't know when you're 16. I mean, maybe some of them, not everybody's Daniel Johns from Silverchair that writes a smash hit at 16 years old, right? But you start playing, you start getting a bunch of comments from other bands and say like, oh my God, like you're awesome, like you're amazing at this. It's like, okay, cool, thanks. And you kind of keep going, and then you start touring and working with other people, and you're not comparing yourself really, like, it's, you're not saying like, oh, I'm a better drummer than this guy or a better singer than this guy. It's nothing to do with that. You're just kind of going with the motions. You just follow what you're passionate about. And I was passionate, and I remain passionate. And it was when I met Arnold Lanni at 24. He told me, he said, hey, out of the 30 years I've been working with people, you're one of the most talented dudes I've ever met. And I see a lot of myself in you. And I'd love to have you down here for the next 5 or so years and teach you everything I know and mentor you. So when he told me that, I was like, oh, this is one of my idols telling me that maybe I can do this. That's what I guess solidified that I can do this. Because that, before then it was always just playing in band, having fun on the road, and you don't know if you can actually do it or not to sustain a career, right?
How did you end up with that Arnold Lanni connection? How do you get to the point where he's telling you you're one of the most talented people I've met?
Well, his brother Rob at Coalition Music manages the bands that Arnold had developed and produced. Finger 11, Our Lady Peace, Simple Plan. Those are Coalition's bands, right? We had sent in demos to Rob Lanny first, right? At Coalition. My brother pretty much did all the heavy lifting there. He would, send it to Rob, and Rob would call us back and say, the songs aren't there. Send me some more stuff. Send him some more stuff. I think it was like maybe the third round. And Rob's like, holy shit, this is some really good stuff. What do you want to do with this? And we're like, we would love to meet your brother because he's made our favorite albums. That's how so he passed it on to Arnold, and Arnold had said, you know what, why don't you guys come down here for a week? So we went down to California through the, setup of Rob and through my brother getting to Rob. And we spent a week down there. And that's when he had, I guess, sort of, took me aside and said that to me. And now I'm thinking too, it's like, he probably says this to everybody, like, who knows, right? But then the fact that he paid my way down there, gave me a car down there, gave me a house down there, paid me like for projects. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm the only one down here. So I guess you see something. And that's sort of when I knew that maybe there is something that I can build off of.
And when you think back to working with Arnold Lanny, what are the thoughts, the memories, the emotions that come to you right now? That's an important part of your life.
Yeah, he's a very unique guy. He's a musical genius, man. Like him in front of a piano writing melodies is like, that's something I'll never forget or take for granted, for that matter. But he never took himself too seriously. Like, it's always just like, I remember once he told me, I was so like shocked when we were writing this part, and he just goes to the piano and just writes this chorus, like as if he already had it before. And I was like, holy shit, Aaron, how did you know to do that? Like, we just write this one part and then you go there and write this, this incredible chorus. How did you even know that should happen? Like, and he said, when you have the sensation, like I remember this. He's like, when you have the sensation to take a piss, where do you go? I was like, the bathroom. And he's like, where else would you go? I was like, nowhere. I go to the bathroom. He's like, that's me with songs. I just know where to go. When he said that, and he's not a cocky guy. He's just, that's what he knows, right? So when he said that to me, I was like, oh, okay. And he said, don't worry, you'll get there one day. It happens. Just keep doing it. So that's one memory I took from there. There's a million of them. He's the analogy king. Every situation you find yourself in, there's an Arnold analogy attached to it somewhere. Extremely slow eater, very slow eater.
Apparently you live longer if you're a slow eater. So.
Oh man, he's the first week, the first day we were there, he had he's like, all right, let's go out and grab a bite. And he's like, you could take your own car. Thinking, wow, we just drive together to the restaurant. He's like, no, you might want to take your own car. And I was like, why? He's like, I take a little long to eat. I'm like, okay, it's fine. Like, we'll go together. How long could it be? And I remember we have, I forgot what we were eating, but he's there with his fork. I'm already halfway done. I'm Italian, so I'm just crushing my meal. And, grabs a piece of chicken or something like that, and he has it up, and he's almost about to eat it. And then he puts it down and starts checking football stats, like what the draft order is that year. I'm like, oh, wow, he takes a very long time to eat. But it's good because it makes for good conversation, right? And a lot of wisdom. He loves helping people, and not just myself. Anybody that I've seen him, come across, sends texts that are novels to people, helping them through things in life, not even just musically, just anything in life, right? He will always take the time to help somebody out when they're going through something. I was actually there during 2 breakups while I was down there. Because I was traveling back and forth. And one of the most important things he told me that stuck was, he was saying, he's like, man, he goes, I know it seems right to keep going back to the same girl. And it's like, there's that attachment, there's that, first love thing still attached to it. He's like, but, how did he put it? He said, don't date the same, date 100 girls once, don't date the same girl 100 times. He's like, then you'll find the one. I was like, holy shit. So, so he helped me through a lot of stuff there. Like he would see me sometimes in the gym or something like that. Let's go grab a beer, go grab a bite. So he really helped me out, not just musically, but with just life in general.
So I have the quote to end all quotes. So I reached out and I was able to get a hold of Arnold Lanny. And you mentioned that he, if someone needs help or support or words of encouragement, he'll write a novel. So not only did I get a quote from Arnold Lanny, after 2.5 years of doing this podcast, getting hundreds of quotes, this is the longest quote that I've received. So he must like you if he wrote a novel. So bear with me here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna go through all of it. So for our listeners, Arnold Lanny is one of the greatest Canadian producers of all time. He did the first 4 Our Lady Peace albums, including the diamond certified album Clumsy. There's almost no album in Canada's gone diamond, let alone a Canadian band. So that's ridiculous. We mentioned I think he did the first 2 Finger 11 albums, or not. Yeah, first 2 after the name change. Simple Plan, 1,000-Foot Crutch. This guy's a legend. And this is what Arnold Lanny has to say about Steve Moe. He says, "I'm always happy to talk about my friend Steve. He's a great drummer, musician, and producer. He's also very creative, and as a result, he's one of the few drummers who understands how to play drums for the song. He's got a great sense of groove, and because he's so smart and intuitive, he takes musical direction incredibly well. Steve never has to be told anything twice." Is this true? Then he says, "During a session, he'll absorb all the musical direction and ideas being tried and articulated, and then absorb the best of it and then deliver a performance that is perfect." It's hard to be perfect. He's always upbeat and positive, and he always sees the glass of life as half full. His never quit attitude is infectious, and his creativity is boundless. He's a joy to work with. He has a sweet and caring disposition that's honest and sincere, and it endears him to everyone. Along with all his wonderful creative and musical abilities, he's also developed a tremendous work ethic. He just never stops working. His character and integrity is beyond reproach, and he's fiercely loyal. And as great as he is as a musician and producer, he's even a better man. I'm super proud of him, and I'm lucky to have him as my friend. Sadly, though, as perfect and blessed as Steve is, you know where this is going. God played a cruel joke on him when he was born. Unfortunately, Steve's been cursed with being a diehard Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Every year, I have to hear the same old tired refrain. This is the one, Arn. Every year. This year is the year for the Leafs. They're going all the way. They're going to win the cup. He's a little bit delusional when it comes to hockey. At one point, just to check his grasp of reality, I once asked him if he thought Santa Claus was real. Steve, being so obsessed with the Maple Leafs, replied, "I don't see his name on the program, so I'm guessing he's still down in the minors." Man. His love of hockey aside, Steve is a great creative drummer, musician, and producer who can do it all. But best of all, he's a great guy. Much love from Arn. So that's Arnold Lanny, super producer.
That is classic Arn for sure. The Leafs thing is funny because I poked fun at Jordan, obviously, with the Habs. Now I get that from Arnold. Very fitting. Yeah, it is true. I every single year, because you'll always kind of ask me, what's going on with your Leafs this year? It's like, oh, Arn, is the one. Like Matthews coming off a big season, 60 plus goals, and Marner and these guys, and then this year we are doing well. Maybe it is the one.
Yeah, maybe nothing changes. Maybe this year is the one.
The one.
There's always hope. So, normally when I get quotes for my guests for the interviews, normally I've had some communication with those people in the past. And with Arnold, I've never spoken to him, never been in communication with him. He's not on Facebook. He's one of the all-time greats. So yeah. I tried a bunch of different things. I ended up finding an email, like people still use email, right? I end up finding an email. I throw off an email and just assume, like, obviously this isn't going to come back in time or if ever. And right away I got that lengthy response. So I totally, that was a Hail Mary pass. And and he came back with it. So that's an awesome one.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy.
That's amazing. Where did your, so we've talked about you as a musician, drummer, learning guitar and bass, vocals, harmonies, all that stuff. Where did your interest in producing come from? Because we have the gap where eventually you're, you know, with Arnold Lanni working there for a few years.
Right.
Where does the actual love of the production come in?
Well, every time I was listening to songs on the, you know, on the radio or anything like that, you start picking apart things that make the song. Because I love just songs so much that you start picking things apart. It's like, okay, well, if, you know, bass player's playing this while drummer's playing this groove, and that's why I think that's why I'm feeling this, and you know, everything's like an equation. And then it was more of a necessity because we'd have these song ideas and we'd go to these producers before that weren't really, you know, the art of production is bringing a song to life. You can kill a song completely with bad production. You can have a great song and you can completely cover that song by bad production, right? So what I thought, we had some good songs. We're working with some producers and like, something's up here because I think the song is good, but something's happening in this, you know, during this process. So I started just learning, like, you know, getting Pro Tools Lite, you know, a long time ago, and learning how to record things, and, you know, grabbing these new plugins and putting vocals on top of the tracks, and then harmonies. You start building it because of I just wanted to see the songs that I had started writing with my band come to life properly. And that's when I started doing it. It's more of, it's like that whole thing of just do it, just go 2 feet in and see if you like it. And that's why that's why I did it, and I could never stop there. And you start admiring some of your favorite producers, right? You start listening to your favorite albums, and you're like, oh my God, like, how did this guy do this with like that effect, or record those drums that way? And that's when I look, you know, you start looking at credits, and Arnold Lanni had it was, you know, I look at Our Lady Peace, like that Naveed record, I'm like, holy shit, the production's incredible on this. It's like Arnold Lanni. And it's like, oh wow, like this Tip album, who produced this? Arnold Lanni. Like, I gotta meet this guy one day, right? And that's how that came about. So I've never stopped there. And then watching him now in the room for a bunch of years do his thing, and how he goes from A to Z in a song and brings that song to life. What happens in the middle, I gravitated towards, and that for me was like, that was the best feeling, that process of bringing a song to life.
And who are some of the other producers that you really admired outside of Arnold?
Butch Vig.
Never
Butch
mind.
Vig for sure. Yeah. And then on the well, not just pop India, Jack Antonoff, who's just on another level, especially these days. He's
the Taylor Swift stuff now, right? He
Taylor
does a lot
Swift
of that
stuff, like he Florence and the Machine, Mark Ronson, right? And because I like different genres growing up, you know, you have your rock guys, right? Like Arnold and Butch Vig, and then you have your pop guys, right? And those guys, I still look up to all those guys. And you try and, you know, not try and steal, but you try and just draw inspiration from it, right? It's like, oh, like that producer always uses these kind of sounds, and I see how they what kind of sounds they use, like, you know, getting to in and out of like segues, like transitions, like everybody will do their own thing, right? And Arnold had his style, and Butch Vig had his style, and you hope that while you're absorbing all of this, you have your own, right?
With your history with funk and with liking Mark Ronson, you must have loved Uptown Funk. That was such an undeniable hit with Bruno
when
Mars.
That came out, that's still one of the best pop songs in the last 10, 15 years for sure.
Dude, that song is so ridiculous. Musicians are often told, look, you got to get a good education, you got to go to school, you got to get a good job. Having a career in the music industry, that's a pipe dream. Nobody makes it. Did you ever come across that kind of resistance from your friends and family? And if so, how did you overcome that to push through with the dream?
I have to say, man, I didn't have much of that. I had the opposite. Like, bless both of my parents. There were times where I said, I don't know, I gotta get out. Like, we all, anybody in the music business that says they never had that moment of like, I gotta get out of this, I gotta do something else, they're lying. I've had those moments of like, I think I gotta get out. My parents are like, no, you gotta stay in. Like, you're doing this, you're on the path of doing it, you're passionate about it, you're talented. So you gotta keep going there. So it was pretty much the opposite for me. But it was basically, it's like at a young age when I was, touring in studios all the time, if you're going to do it, you got to be the best at it, or else it's 2 feet in. Don't just do it, or else at that point, it'll be like, we're done supporting you at that point. But if you're going to do it, at least try to be the best at it. Work twice as much, twice as hard as the next person. And that's the only way you're going to get ahead. So I guess, that's what Arnold's saying about the whole work ethic thing. That was ingrained early. Like, if you're going to do it, you have to outwork the next person. And there's a bunch of people that are just more, naturally gifted. Right. But one thing that I can control is how many hours more I'm working than they are. And that's my motto.
It definitely helps that your dad is a musician, right? Because he knows the life, he knows the dream, and
I guess, his barometer was like different than the average parent of being like, oh, my kid's incredible. Everybody thinks their kid's incredible, right? Where my dad would have criticism for a lot of things, like that. You got to get stronger at that. That you're good at. That could be better. So I had that along the way, which was very helpful.
Was your mom also musical, or just a lover of music and supportive?
Not a musical bone in her body, but the best woman ever. So she's super, always been super supportive.
You could have done anything and she would have supported you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Those are the best moms to have.
Yeah.
I have some kind words sent in here from someone that touches on you as a producer, not just a drummer. So this is from Bruce Nickel, who is an amazing bass player. I was a fan of his back when he was in Idle Sons. He's now one of the most sought after stage techs, guitar techs, tour managers.
He's the hardest working man in the industry.
Every time I share a quote from him with someone, people say this guy is hustling. And even when everything was shut down for 2 years during the pandemic,
Bruce found a way to work.
Somehow he was still working. He's the only guy that was still working.
Finger 11 guys, we laughed big time. We're all like, at home, like no shows, whatever. And I remember somebody saying like, how is Bruce Nickel still touring when the entire world shut down?
Yeah, he's doing like those parking lot like drive-in shows. He's just fixing instruments along McQuaid. He's hustling. So this is what Bruce Nickel has to say. He says, Steve is a consummate professional, an amazingly enthusiastic and brilliant musician. He's a wonderful guy to work with. His ability as a drummer is only surpassed by his knowledge as a producer. Steve is also surprisingly adept at literally anything you can think of. Darts at last call, internet trivia, possibly astrophysics, everything else you can shake a stick at. So it's from Bruce Nickel.
Awesome. What a guy. What a beauty. He's a tour story from Bruce. I remember my first tour that, he was tour managing on. I would always ask, hey, Bruce, where's the, like we're on the tour bus and I'd be like, hey Bruce, where's the hotel from here? And first he'd be like, okay, well, here's the address, whatever. And then I'm like, hey Bruce, what time's sound check? And I remember one day he was like super busy. He's like, Steve Mo, it's on the fridge. He goes, every day, and he walked me to the fridge. He's like, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're 2 weeks in. He goes, I wake up every day and I advance the entire day. Everything is here. Like to like where the nearest bathroom is. He goes, it's on the fridge. So if you ask me again, it's on the fridge. I was like, all right, got it. Noted.
That's his answer for everything moving
He's
forward.
One of the best guys.
It's on the fridge.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I need to get him a shirt for Christmas that says on the fridge.
It's on the fridge, yeah.
Do you have any advice for our young listeners who are new drummers, new producers, new songwriters? Any advice for them to get better at their craft and have a chance of doing this for a living in the future?
Yeah, I do. Number one, you have to be you have to be talented. Like you have to work on your craft. Like that's more of like, that's a given, right? That's not, that's not any bonus marks for that. You have to be talented to sustain a career in this business. That's obvious. I'd say the thing to work on or to acknowledge, you just got to be a good person. You got to be a good person. The talent's going to open the door. Being a good person is going to keep you in the room. Always, always, always. And I've noticed that with people who I want to keep around me. There's a ton of talented people that I'd love to have in the studio, but when you pick up your phone, the ones you call are the ones that you have a good relationship with, right? Even if it's not, a best friend or something like that, somebody that you only work with 3 times. But if that person made an impact, not just with their playing, but with their personality, that's the one you call always. Because you got to be in a room with this person for, 10 hours. You got to be on a bus with this person for months on end. So talent's not enough. You have to be talented. That's a given. But I'd say really understand that being a good person is just as important.
That's all great advice. And when I went on your website doing my research, I saw a list of artists that you worked with, and I saw you had worked with a really good friend of mine. So I have a quote here from Michael Orsini from Euphoria.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So the 11 years I was in Mississauga, him and I hung out all the time. He played my open mics I hosted. We played poker together. I went to birthday parties. I know his whole family. So it was awesome to see his name on that list. And he's always been talented and the songs have always been great. But there was a point where suddenly the recorded music sounded amazing. And I was like, man, finally, like here's him actually displaying his talent fully fleshed out. And that's probably where you came in is I think you worked on 4 more songs, songwriting, producing. Yep. And that's the stuff where I was like, okay, Euphoria now is actually what they're supposed to be. Yep. The technical side is finally what it needs to be. So this is what Mike says. He says, Steve is a masterful drummer and producer. He'll elevate any song for any artist. So it's short and sweet from Michael Orsini.
Awesome. Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying, like bringing a song to life. There could be somebody who's talented or is a good songwriter, but if that's not, put in the mix with the right producer, and it's not just really a good producer, it's the right one. It's like a dating, it's a relationship, right? The first couple sessions is like that dating process. Like, are we good together? Like, is this going to work? And then once you find out it is, you almost the artist puts a lot of trust in the producer, because when that artist goes home, that producer, like it's their career, their songs, they're in their, in their hands. Right. And that's one thing, any artist that walks in the room, I care just as much as the next artist. So, when Mike came, I was like, okay, he's got something. He just needs, the help on this end to really, bring those songs to life. And we did. It was good. I remember, I think it was one of the first songs we had worked on, ended up being like the Blue Jays like intro song, like
Fight or Flight or something.
Fight or Flight, yeah, that got used a bunch. And I remember they had a great winning record when that song was played. So that was used throughout the whole season. I think a couple seasons.
Maybe the Maple Leafs should have used that song too then, right?
They did during they did during the games a lot, which was good. But yeah.
That's awesome. So let's dive into Finger 11 now. So we worked our way up all the way from you in diapers playing drums all the way to Finger 11. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Let me know if you can see this. You see this? Oh, that's a different picture. Hold on.
Oh, there you go.
That's us. Hold on. I got to get a different picture up here. Okay. So let's see if we can see this one. Okay. Can you see that?
I can. Yep.
So that's so we got Finger 11 here. This is at a nice sold out show. Just to give a visual here. Do you remember the first time that you heard Finger 11's music or heard of the band? You mentioned Tip a few times. Yep. It's probably around that time.
It was same deal. Much Music, Above. That video, that song. That's why that'll always be probably one of my like top 3 Finger Eleven songs, just because of that moment of like, oh, this band is phenomenal. This song is so cool. And that's when I guess I forgot how old I was, but that was my first introduction to Finger Eleven. And it's just been, it was a super fan up to the point I joined.
Yeah, I remember I made a mixtape back when you could make mixtapes, and I had Quicksand on it from that album, which is a great tune. Or Awake and Dreaming as well.
Awake and Dreaming,
that was one of the slower.
That whole album was incredible. But yeah, Quicksand is my favorite, top for me, just because the drumming on that.
And how did that opportunity present itself for you to join the band? Was it there was an audition? Was it that they just already knew you were the guy and said, hey, we have a spot for you? My best guess, so I don't know the history, my best guess is we talked about Arnold Lanni having done the first 2 Finger Eleven albums. You worked for several years with Arnold Lanni. Mm-hmm. Is that any part of the connection?
It was definitely through the Lanni connection. It was through his brother Rob, who was managing at the time. And we had this is when I was still, again, just at the tail end of playing with the Balconies. Coalition had like a hockey league that we'd play every Wednesday night or Thursday night. And we're in the parking lot after the game, and Rob was like, hey, do you want to I think it was like, how did he word it? Do you want to play with Finger Eleven? And I thought at first he meant open for, like, because I was with the Balconies. Do you want to play with Finger Eleven? Like, oh man, I'd love to open for Finger Eleven. Like, well, obviously one of my favorite bands. He's like, no. Do you want to play with them? I was like, oh, what's going on? Like, with Rich, whatever. And he's like, yeah, there's, obviously stuff going on, and Rich is not in the band anymore. So they've been having auditions for drums. I'm like, oh, you gotta, set me up with that. So he said, okay. He's like, maybe next week. And I think it was like a Wednesday. I was like, Rob, I can do like tomorrow. I can do Friday. Like, I know these songs anyway. It doesn't really matter. So I think we did in a couple of days. He gave me a list. It was 8 songs. And they obviously front loaded it with the most technical songs first. It was Quicksand and Good Times right away. And that's how it happened. So we auditioned at Coalition in the studio live room. So that was my first time meeting the guys. So I met the guys
while auditioning.
Yep. Shook their hands, went behind the kit, saw the set list. And I remember not even rehearsing them, because I'd rehearsed those songs for 10 years, because I'd play those songs in bands, like with buddies. We jam those songs all the time. Quicksand, Good Time, Above, First Time, like all these songs I've already been playing for years. So that was like no different than playing with my buddies, but playing with them. And I was obviously super excited. I remember not even being nervous.
I was saying we'll have to get Bruce Nickel a shirt for Christmas that says "On the Fridge." For you, we'll have to get one that says #blessed, because who else gets to work with their favorite producer of all time and then gets to become a member of their favorite band? I mean, Steve, living the dream, man. How can one man be so blessed? I mean, that's amazing.
Honestly, I'm very, very, very lucky in that sense, man. And to meet and be mentored by the guy that was part of those first couple albums, my favorite albums, and then to have a great relationship with the guy who's managed them for 20 years, and then be in the band. So it started off as like me being in the band and being like, I'm in Finger Eleven, I'm in one of my favorite bands. You kind of forget it, because they're like some of the best dudes I've ever met, not just in the industry, just in general. Like they've treated me like family, like a good friend since day one. Like since that first show, it's been like I'm in the group chat with the band, and that's it. And that was like the band moving forward. And they've always treated me like a member from like show one. So I got to get up to those guys, like huge hand for those guys. So that's, I guess, living the dream.
It's funny. I worked at Metalworks for 7 years, the recording studio in Mississauga. And there's a lot of employees, but there was someone there that just never looked happy. And every day when I'd be like, oh, hey man, how's it going? He'd be like, living the dream, like super monotone.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's my favorite response ever when I ask how someone's doing is when they say living the dream, when clearly in their mind they're not living the dream. So anyways, it's cool to see you say living the dream when you're actually living the dream. We have our first fan question sent in here. So this is from Finger 11 fan Ben Woods. And his question is, what is the biggest challenge of joining an already established band?
That's a great question. I guess there's a pressure of keeping the professionalism that they've already established. There is a pressure to that. You're not all starting on the same page. You're not all, it's not like we're all in the minors and we all got to the pro level together. They're already there. So it's just, there's a pressure of, excelling quickly to the level that they're already at and trying to keep that for them. And, trying to, they've had these songs for a number of years. They've had them played live for a number of years and by, say Rich, who's a phenomenal drummer. And now you got to fill those shoes and you got to do it quickly because you're playing in front of 5,000, 10,000 people like right away. And so there was a pressure of just delivering their songs the way they've heard them for the longest time and make it as seamless as possible for them and to fit in where they never had to worry and look back once. That was that to me was the most important thing for me was like, I need to make them feel like they're incredibly comfortable, that they could just be in their element and do their thing live without ever worrying that something's going to go wrong behind them. And it had to be done right away. But that's a great question.
So Rich has a unique drum style. What was it like learning all those Finger 11 drum parts? And Rich actually wanted to know when he sent the quote, he's like, I'd be curious to know just what it was like to learn those parts. Cause it's one thing to be the one that made them and you're playing them. It's one thing like it's in your, your style.
You have all the respect for the people because playing them is one, like, lifting them from an album is one thing, but creating is a whole different thing that you have a deep appreciation for. Learning, Tip, which was, and I knew this after when working with Arnold, that's a lot of Arnold writing drum patterns. Nobody had to tell me.
That's before Rich, right? Rich didn't play on Tip.
That's a guy named Rob, who was drumming on that album. And for as far as I know, he was a solid drummer as well. And that's a lot of Arnold crafting those parts with the guys, right? Based on the riffs that they're writing. And so lifting those ones was like, that was a Quicksand and Above and just like these incredible drum parts. And then I think where Rich entered, where he was creating the parts was on the self-titled, right? With like, with Good Times and Absent Elements and Stay in Shadow. Those are phenomenal drum parts. Like Good Times is like, you can solo that drum. It's what I talked about before with like Travis Barker and Dave Grohl. It's like, you can solo the drum track and it's like, that's a hook by itself. Like that's a song by itself. That was Good Times for me. That from start to finish, that entire drum track is like, it's iconic, man. It's so good. So learning that one was a lot of fun, and because he has a unique drum style, you have to adopt that in your playing, right? So yeah, I mean, very very fun to go through and dissect the parts. And again, you don't want to just do, well, it's like, well, okay, well, that was his take and this is my take on the track. It's like, no, you're trying to be as close to that as possible because that's what the band's used to. That's what the fans are used to. And that's what Rich intended, right? So if he intended that and it's successful, why would I want to change it to make it, me? And that's a lot of artists do that, and that's fine. But when somebody's already done the work to create this drum part or guitar part or bass part, whatever it is, you want to try and match it as close as possible. And I think I'm doing a good job at it. So
yeah, and in a little bit we'll talk maybe a sneak peek at there's new music that you're working on. That stuff is where you'll be able to put in your own style and your own, that's where you'll be able to get super creative. So behind me here, you can see I have the Grayest of Blue Skies. So these are my 12 favorite albums from guests that I've interviewed on the podcast. So in honor of Rick, Rich, and you, I got the Grayest of Blue Skies here. Maybe when the new album comes out, we'll put that up there as well. Did you hear that on this album, The Grayest of Blue Skies, it was actually all an electronic drum kit?
Oh yeah,
it was like V drums or whatever. It's crazy. The drums sound amazing, and then you hear later it was this early electronic kit.
And the story behind that was, hearing this from Arnold, was I think that like it was programmed, and then I believe like they wanted to try and replace those after, because it was programmed first for them to like play along to, and then I believe it was like they're trying to replace it, but they were trying to go for this industrial sound like Nine Inch Nails and these types of bands, which sounded exactly like that, right? With the really like cold sounding guitars and drums, and like they nailed it in my opinion. And hear songs like Drag You Down, it's so like rigid, and like, so I think they ended up staying with those, and the drum sounds are phenomenal. And that's like, nowadays you have this software that you can make V drums or Superior Drummer on any of these programs to sound as real as possible. But to have that, back then, make them sound that good, they sounded fun. I didn't know when it came out that it was electronic.
I didn't know that, and that came out when I was 15, and I didn't know until the interview a few months ago with Rich that was an electronic kit. It was like it was like a confession from him. He was almost like embarrassed that and then later on he felt like he had more say in everything. I think also the early 3 Days Grace stuff, they had the V drums as well, so that was all like ahead of its time. Did you have any fear joining a band that was already successful, or was it mostly just excitement? You knew you were the right guy, you knew the parts, or is there a fear of like, man, this is one of my favorite bands, these guys are already multi-platinum and Juno award winning? Everyone kind of has that imposter syndrome in there somewhere of like, am I the right guy? Should I be here? Do I deserve this?
You know what? One would think that you'd be that, there's a fear attached to it or being nervous, but I didn't. I honestly didn't. I met the guys, solid guys, did the audition, felt right. First show was flawless. Like I played the parts exactly how I should. And I felt like I that was what I was supposed to do. Like I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And I was supposed to meet them. I was supposed to be in the band. And I never once had a fear that came along with it, that, like what if, or maybe I'm not the right guy. I knew I was the right guy. And I think part of that is because they've told me that many times. They're like, dude, you're meant to be in this band. Like we were supposed to find you. You were supposed to find us. They reassured that pretty early on. Like there was never like the band and then myself, right? It was always like, you're in the band. Like you're working hard to, make the show as successful as, as we all want. And they've always made me feel like a member. So I've never once felt like, is this, do I deserve this or like that? It's like, shit, if I was 18 years old and I joined the band, that was an established band, it'd be like, man, do I deserve this? I haven't paid my dues. But by that point, I'd already been touring for like 14 years, sleeping on hotel room floors in Europe and America, and piling in a van with 7 other people and sleeping on people's shoulders and shit like that. So it's like never once. That's why when I get the, oh man, you're lucky. Yeah, you create that too, right? You create that. So when you hear you're lucky, it's like, no, it's not luck. Yeah, there's luck that's a part of it, because there's a lot of people that work their ass off and they're talented and maybe they don't get those opportunities, but you create that along the way. Like if you're paying your dues for 15 years, can't really call it luck, right?
Yeah, the old 15-year overnight success.
That's it. So you can't, like, you create that.
What do you remember from that very first show that you played with Finger 11?
It was North North Bay. What I do remember is the intros of songs. Just get that right, and then the rest is the parts from there. It's just because we weren't playing on click at that point, because I guess they weren't doing that at the time, or maybe they were, I'm not really sure, but those shows we weren't playing to a click, so tempo was a big deal. It's freeform at that point. You establish the tempo, so it's not just about playing the part and make sure the arrangement's right. It's the tempo of the track. That's everything. But because the production background, I listen to the singer always, the breathing pattern, the syncopation, all those things. So I'm listening to Scott the entire time. And that's what I still do now. If I find he's stumbling, it's too fast, right? And so it was just picking the right tempos that they can lock into. That was one that I was definitely thinking about, because live too, there's a whole bunch of adrenaline that comes along with it. And what you think is like, slow, it's like, it's probably too fast. So it's just keeping that, and just that excitement. It's like, holy shit, I'm playing in front of Finger 11 in front of like 5,000 people. Like, relax on the tempos, like kind of, breathe and everything's going to be fine, sort of thing.
You have it within your power to play the song so fast that you turn Finger 11 into an all-out dance band. You just 100%. Know that you have that power at any point. You could flip the switch there.
And that would be my last show. Exactly.
Yeah. It works every time, but the last.
Yeah.
What makes Scott Anderson such a great singer and such a great frontman? It's a powerful dude up there.
Yeah, his tone is unmatched to me. He's got one of the best voices in rock. Not just because we're good friends and he's the singer in the band that I play in. He's had a voice that no matter what volume he's at in a mix, he's somehow the loudest thing in the mix. You know what I mean? Like, if you muted that guy's vocals, he'd still come through. Like, he's so powerful, and lyrically phenomenal. And what solidified that was watching fans approach him after a show, being like, hey, I just got to let you know, like, you helped me through the darkest, times of my life. And, I had a death in the family and you really got me through it with one thing and all these things. So it's like, when you see that too, it's like, holy shit, like, it's exactly what I thought, it was at the time. And that just, cemented that. But his voice is phenomenal.
Is Sean Anderson the most underrated bass player of all
100%.
Time? Because so this is my third deep dive interview with a Finger 11 member. So I've listened to the entire discography with great studio headphones. I don't know how 5 times I've gone through the whole discography. And one thing that is apparent when you listen to all the Finger 11 music is the bass playing is unbelievable. There are so many hooks with the bass. Like, if you muted the bass and listened to the entire discography, Finger 11 would not be Finger 11. It is so memorable, so catchy, so many hooks. I mean, you think just so unique. You think of like Drag You Down, which is such a heavy song. And then there's like kind of this like jazzy, like,
it's like a reggae thing. Like, he's playing all in the.
It's like this walking bass in the verse that is so like counter to the rest of the song.
Yeah.
So, anyways, anything you can say about Sean Anderson?
Yeah. So, well, to that point, like, listen to obviously Paralyzer, like, solo that bass track. Nuts. Falling On, Living a Dream. Like, he's so creative. He is for sure, to your point, one of the most underrated bass players. And I'll give a little insight to that. I'm editing right now the Finger 11 live, compiling all the songs and picking which mics are going where with audience mics and all that stuff. And I'm soloing his bass track, and I'm playing it along to the click. And I even sent him a video of, like, it was like 1 minute of could have been First Time or something like that. And it was so locked on the grid. I don't like, there's nothing you have to nudge or like that. It's perfect. And I sent him that. He's like, and he thinks the opposite, right? Like, he thinks like, oh man, he works. Nobody works harder than Sean right? So when we're rehearsing, I know he's going back and he's playing the song still. He's still rehearsing the songs at home, and like he just wants every show to be his best show, and it comes through because he's the most rock solid guy in the band, in my opinion, by far. Not only that I think he cares the most, right? But it comes through in his playing, and I'm listening to like these solo tracks on the live album. It's like, man, this guy is. I've always known he was solid, but when you get to hear it now, right? Because you hear it with, loud in-ear monitors with guitars and drums and vocals, but when you hear it soloed, it's like, holy shit, this guy is phenomenal. He's very, very, very good. And like before shows, like 10 minutes before set time, he's like, hey, so in tip, we extend it. How long? He goes, I just want to make sure, like we send it like 4 bars and then we do that little tag thing. And then you play that fill. I'm like, yeah, Sean, like we got it. Right. Like you'll nail it. He's like, I know, I just want to make sure. Cause I know we changed it like last show. I just want to make sure that we're doing that still. Like he's always so on the ball, not just on stage. Like if it's, the guys can attest to this. If Sean Anderson is not in this band, I don't know if this band still exists. Seriously, that guy takes care of everything. Like not just on stage with how he plays his parts, but off stage. Like anytime we're traveling between shows, guess who's driving? Sean. Guess who's gassing up? Sean. Guess who's booking the hotels? Sean. Guess who's advancing pretty much everything? It's Sean. So I can't say enough about that guy.
He's the consummate professional. Every band needs one guy like him that holds everything together,
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm probably one of the sweetest guys you'll meet.
And how much fun is it to play live with 2 crazy guitarists like Rick Jacket and James Black that are absolute madmen on stage, and they're doing the craziest stuff, throwing guitars in the air, guitar around the neck, taking off the strap and playing it without the strap on, and never missing a note. What can you say about the 2 guitarists?
Yeah, they're that's like Maniac 1 and Maniac 2, right?
They deserve each other.
Big time. They belong together, those guys, like on stage. Like their dynamic is incredible, right? You can't say enough about them. Like just aside from like they wrote those incredible parts, those guitar parts, right? So that already in itself is incredible. But how they bring those parts to life on a live stage, I remember watching them for the first time being on this side of the stage, just watching them move. And I remember Rick once just watching like throw a guitar up in the air, and I'm watching it I'm like, holy shit. And he catches it like perfectly on the down chord. Right. Or like, I remember him playing. So the way he plays above, it's like, in drop tuning, whatever. So like the first chord is open, and he throws it up in the air with the open chord, then catches it on the fret, then catches it on the next fret, and you're hearing it. It's like right in time and like right in tune. You're like, holy shit. Like to do that, that's a whole different thing. That's like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of guys that can play guitar, but can a lot of guys do that? No, not even close. They wouldn't even dare attempt that. And that's what those guys are doing live. And I think aside from the songs and having these hit songs, that has to be why fans keep coming back. It's not just the songs, right? Like if you're a fan, okay, I can hear these songs as many times as I want on Spotify or on the CDs that I bought. But they got to keep coming back because like, what are they going to do next? How high is Rick going to toss his guitar this show? Right. And that I still watch that live, and it's still a cool show for me to watch. Right. Cause nothing's more boring than just watching guys in front of you.
It's like performance art up there.
It is, man. It's incredible. I feel like it's so hard to do, and you got to do it every night. Right. And even those times where, I remember Rick once, he's like, man, he goes, yeah, my feet like today are just like killing. I got these new shoes or whatever it was. And he's like, it's not something happened where it's like my ankle, like kind of kills. And it was like a first show back in a while. He's like, I don't know. Maybe I might take it easy tonight. And I knew right away, it's like, that's such bullshit. He's not going to take it easy. So he goes on stage and like song 1, he's already like spinning around, like throwing the guitar. I'm like, yeah, there's no way he can stay away from that. And that's what makes it it's such a good, like, that's what makes him such a good performer, that it's like, doesn't matter how I'm feeling. They paid money to come see the show that they think they're going to see. So I got to deliver. And that's what those guys do every single night.
And James Black might be the most creative person I've ever met. He just like oozes art, like whether it's music or anything else.
Some of those, like, whether it's some of those guitar parts that he's playing, to even now, like, we're, you know, working on new stuff. So like every day we get these updates from James designing cover art and stuff for vinyl, and he's a wizard, man. The guy's incredible. He's super creative, right? He's one of those creators that like doesn't ever stop creating, right? You don't take like the true creatives don't take a break from creating. They're just always creating at a certain capacity, whether it's writing a song or whether it's drawing or directing a music video. Like, that's James always.
I have a funny story about how creative James is. Do you remember the app Draw Something? So there was like this worldwide craze where there was this app Draw Something. So you would connect with people that you're friends with on Facebook. So for example, if you and I were friends, I would send you a request saying, hey, do you want to play Draw Something? And you basically, they give you a word and you try to draw it. And then the other person has to guess what your drawing is. And most people are pretty bad, and it's funny. So it's so funny. I somehow had James Black on Facebook, which meant I could send him a Draw Something request. So I'm like, okay. So I send him a Draw Something request and he accepts it. So I have my word and I draw some like horrible stick man trying to show something. And it's like, he's like, oh, I don't know what that is. He sends one back and he literally drew me like the Mona Lisa of Draw Something. Like it was like, I could have sold that for $10,000. He drew like exactly whatever the word was. And it was the greatest art I've ever seen. And he did it with his finger on an app. So
he's nuts. He's so creative. And one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. Like, he's a super funny guy. He always makes this joke. I think it was at like the 4 or 5 year mark of me being in the band, and I was on the kit, ready for sound check, and he looks at me. He's like, "Oh, cool! Like, so you're still here? Like, you're still on the gig? Like, just." And he always just makes that joke. It's like, "Oh, cool, man." Or after a show, he'd be like, "Man, like, you play well. Like, you for sure. At least you got like another year with us, kind of thing, right?" Like, he's always like making that comment. Super funny guy.
That's awesome. For our musician listeners that are into gear, into tech, do you have a favorite drum kit? Do you have a go-to drum kit that you use when you play with Finger 11?
I have my kit, Yamahas. They're for like any drummers that want to know the specs. It's the Yamaha, the Absolutes, the Maples. They're 24. I like big drums, especially with that band. 24 kick, 13, 16, 18 toms. And I'm with Sabian and Yamaha as well. They sent me that kit maybe 7 years ago, I guess.
Amazing. So earlier you mentioned that, so there was the 2 or 3 year break with no live shows because of writing and then the pandemic. Your first show back is at the Burlington Sound of Music Festival, which I've been to a few times. And it was like 10,000 people. Can you describe, one, what it's like to play to 10,000 people, and two, what it's like after a 3-year break that your first show back, like you're okay, let's get back into it, 10,000 people?
Honestly, there's 2 ways this can go. Either I'm incredibly nervous and it's going to be a terrible show, or we're so damn excited because it's been so long and we can't wait to play in front of 10,000 people. Right. So we looked at it, I guess, that way, the half full way. And we had one of the better shows. It was we played really well. Fans ate it up. Scott killed it. That's hard. Like, it's one thing to, drums or guitar, whatever, but your vocals, like, you can warm up all you want for 2.5 years off, but to play 90 minutes while, yelling at between songs and, rallying up the crowd, like that's hard to do. Vocals is in a completely different animal in studio, live, and he crushed it. So it was a successful night for us. It was definitely, obviously, nerve wracking to know leading up to it, saying like, holy shit, this is gonna be we wish we had like a small, intimate, pop-up gig or something like that just before. But we look at, they're all very, very, very positive guys. And it was like, hey guys, you know what? This is what we wanted for the last 2.5 years. So let's go give a good show. And it was, 10,000 plus people. It was nuts.
Do you think a part of what made it such a great performance was you guys had like 3 years of like pent up energy and pent up aggression?
That's honestly what it was. And it was like, we picked up right where we left off.
Do you have a favorite Finger 11 song to play live? Like when you look at the set list, there's 15 songs coming up. Is there ever one song where you see it on there and you're like, all right, here we go, this is the one?
Usually Quicksand and Good Times, just because the energy, like the drum parts are super cool, but just the energy. Quicksand always gets such an incredible response live, and obviously Paralyzer, and that's obviously a big crowd pleaser. But I got to be honest, when Paralyzer came out, it's not like I had the same attachment as I did with the early singles. When Paralyzer came out, I was like, oh wow, that is different, right? Like that's coming off. Remember, they're like self-titled, and they had one thing on there, but Good Times on there. It's a heavy album. And then Paralyzer, I remember, came out. I was like, oh wow, this is different. That had to grow on me, that song, right? So it wasn't one of my favorites, but I quickly understood why it was as big as it was when we played it in front of 20,000 people, and we play it as the encore, and people are like, they go nuts. And it's like, I get it. I totally get it now.
Yeah, that was the transition from like hard rock to more of a dance rock style. And I remember when that song came out, that must have been like 2007, 2008, somewhere in there.
Something like that. I think 2008. Yeah.
That song was undeniable. And that wasn't just Canada. That was like global, undeniable hit. And recently, in the last few weeks, Paralyzer was just certified 5 times platinum in Canada. And it is the only rock song ever to be certified 5 times platinum in Canada. Like, you guys have history, history right there.
Hold on. I'm going to show you something. I got to go grab something. Give me like 30 seconds.
All right. So those that are just listening, Steve ran away to go grab something.
It was wrapped in a whole bunch of bubble wrap. But so this is the plaque that we were given by the label. And I wanted to show this because I was still a fan when that song came out. But what meant the world to me was they gave me a plaque with my name on it, which is like unheard of. Like nobody gets a plaque for a song they had absolutely no part of, right? So when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Like, I knew it meant a lot to the guys and to the crew, but to get that was like I can't be more grateful for that. And just for them, like the success of 5 times, but like, that's nuts. And it's funny, the band is so humble, like too humble, in my opinion. When they got it, I think it was like the week after we were no, the night, the Ottawa show. We were in Toronto the night before, and we're in the car. We're driving there, and they're like, "Should we do a post about that?" And I'm thinking, I'm like, "Yeah." And Sean looks at me, he's like, is that like a good achievement? Like whatever that was, like the plaque is like. I'm like, dude, you're the only one that can say you have that. He's like, oh shit. And then they don't do a post about it, right? And it's just like, they're like, I don't know, like in their heads, they're like, I don't know, does everybody just get that? Like they are the most humble human beings you'll ever meet. And it's crazy. It's like anybody else that gets that, it's like all of a sudden, like social media, look what I did, look what I made, look what it achieved. These guys are like, yeah, that's cool. And then like everybody, just talk about like the kids in the group chat, like as if it was nothing. And it's like, holy shit. Like they're the most humble guys I've ever met.
Yeah, like
Which is
literally no one
no
has
one.
ever achieved that
Yes.
for
But
rock in
but for
Canada.
them, yeah, but for them, they're just like, yeah, I don't know. It's cool.
To back up your story, so I'm friends with Rick on Facebook, and I know his wife as well from
Yeah.
some other shows,
Yeah.
and he didn't post. His wife posted
Yeah. Yeah.
saying my husband is too what's the word? He's too my husband is too humble, so he won't post it, but I'm gonna post it because it's a big deal. So I only knew about this because his wife posted
Yeah.
because she was so proud of the achievement. So
Yeah.
it's unbelievable,
Yeah.
you know.
These guys, like they like it's when I remember saying, like, hey guys, we should probably add this song in the set. This was, years ago. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah. Like it was like number one. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. They're like, okay, I guess, well, if fans like it, I'm like, this is crazy, man. Like they don't look at stats. They don't look at anything. They do what they truly do, what makes them happy. Right. But that one blew me away. Like I knew they're humble guys, but when they were talking about it, like, it's like, yeah, it's a cool achievement. And then like carry on, the day as if like they didn't just do something that nobody else has done in rock music in Canada. But yeah, I mean, that's also why it's not an accident why there's still a band 20 something, odd years later, because of that. There's no ego. Um, there's no like nothing that really comes between the guys. You could see it. Like we can be on the road for months and nothing. There's not really a day where it's like, no, nobody wants to hang out with this person. Like we all hang out for dinner, go watch games together. It's like there's a reason why the band is still a band today.
Yeah, I think it's important that they did provide you with that plaque because you're the torchbearer with that song moving forward. You're the one that's still playing that every
Right.
night. When the live greatest hits album comes out, you're the one playing that song.
Right.
So you're a part of that history, and you're the one carrying that torch moving forward. So I think
Yep.
I agree with that idea to get that plaque. I
Awesome.
think that's a good idea. And to further add to the legacy of that song, so 5 times platinum in Canada, never been done. That's a huge deal. That's 400 to 500,000 copies sold. That's huge. In the US, it's over like 3.4 million copies sold. So, triple or quadruple platinum in
Sure.
the US.
Yeah.
But just because US has 10 times the population, the numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's wild. And the last time I checked, Paralyzer on Spotify alone, I think had over 100 million spins. Like just the numbers are ridiculous with this song.
Two 220 million now.
Okay, so maybe it was 200 that it hit when I checked.
But
And
still,
that's just Spotify. Like it could have the same on Apple,
yeah, it's
the
crazy.
music video itself probably, I don't know, it's 30 million, I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts.
That's about as global as you can get with a song. We have another fan question sent in. This is from Shelly Terry, and on Facebook there's kind of like an official Finger 11 page.
Yeah.
So it's the Finger 11 fan crew on Facebook. They always help me out prepare questions for these interviews, and I give them shout outs. She wants to know which Finger 11 song is the most difficult to play and why. So you might have mentioned before, but just to dive into one specific song.
Most difficult to play.
Was it Quicksand you were saying, or no?
Yeah, it was Quicksand. Like if you're not, it's not one of those things you can just sort of like set it and forget it, because there's so many time changes in that song, right? So I would say, yeah, I'd go back to that. You pretty much have to be on your game always to make sure that song is played right, because there's a ton of like weird, odd time signatures that go on in that song, and just like really cool fills that are happening throughout. A lot of intricacy that goes along with it. So I'd say that one.
So seeing as we just had a question sent in from a fan, I want to know what's your craziest, sweetest, funniest, most memorable fan interaction with your time with Finger 11? Has there been anything that stands out?
Oh yeah, big time. One of them is a fan, Megan. she made finger 11 onesies for my daughter Evelyn when she was born 4 years ago. She showed up to a show with a little green gift bag, and she's like, "Here, I know you just had you had a baby recently. I wanted to give you a gift." And it was all the albums on the onesie. It was like the coolest thing. That will always be the most memorable standout things that from a fan. Super cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sometimes you hear like a fan did something embarrassing or horrible or whatever. Right. So it's good to have like the good story.
Man, it was like, it was so cool. Like, I remember putting it on the bus and the guys were like, I never got that when I had a kid. Like, why'd you get that? It's like, I don't know, like just good timing, I guess.
#blessed. Yeah. Let's dive into the greatest hits live album and DVD. So we had talked a little bit about it before, that you were the one that's mixing it. You talked about isolating Sean's bass parts, different things. Let me just share my screen real quick. So I think I by accident already showed this picture, but can you see this? So,
oh yeah,
there we are. See this picture. So, this is you and I and my friend Frank. This is in front of the venue, the Bronson Center. You did the sold out Toronto show, sold out Ottawa show. All the fans knew that you were recording both and filming both. And the goal is for this to be a live greatest hits album and or DVD. Yeah. And I have a quote sent in from somebody that helped make sure that the drums sounded and looked as good as possible that night. So this is from Jordan Gauthier, who's a drum legend in Canada, working with Alexis on Fire and the Arkells and Silverstein and Finger 11. So he says, Steve is a real gem, one of the kindest people I know, an immense talent, both on stage and as a performer and in the studio as a producer. It's always a good day in my eyes when you're spending it with Steve Moe. Regardless if he has horrible taste in hockey teams. It's always the hockey. It's hard to be a Leafs fan with Ottawa fans and Montreal fans. He says, you think someone who hasn't tasted a playoff series win in a while, that they wouldn't have such great taste for picking good lunch spots. Yeah. So anyways, a little jab from Jordan Gauthier.
Yeah, he's a beauty, man. He's so good. I mean, I shared the quote from his last episode that you had. He's such a hardworking dude. He's just got a great attitude and just a good hang. He's an awesome guy.
Did you feel more pressure going into that Toronto and Ottawa show, knowing it was being filmed and recorded, or is it all just the same?
Yeah, you feel pressure in a sense of not the playing aspect, because the playing aspect, you just got to do your thing, right? You got to hope that every show, if it was recorded, it would be good. But more of like just the technical sense, like things get recorded properly? Like, is this is the being on the production side, is the gain staging properly set properly? Are things going to come back distorted? Is this mic going to get muted for half a song? Like, it's more of those things, the technical part, that you're more nervous for. But the playing part, I mean, that's what makes live and a song on Spotify, like that. That's what you want. You want those little mistakes here and there. That's what makes it live. But it was more of the technical part, because I knew I'd be getting the files afterwards, and I want to know how they're going to be laid out in my Pro Tools. Are going to be easy to work with, and so it was more of that. But I think I can speak for all of us, and we just wanted to have a good show, and I'm sure it would translate digitally.
So in that picture that I showed with the three of us after the show, you actually had the hard drive in your hand. So you collected the hard drive with all the audio files, and you'll be the one that's editing and mixing. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be editing. When you're editing a live show, it's more so just like, if, a lot to do with vocals, in a sense where, you're not singing perfectly like this live, right? You're moving around. So there's some parts where the volume's like super loud, and there's some where it's like you're far away and stuff like that. Well, in the studio, you'd want it to be the proximity to be the same all the time. So you're basically just automating, like making this louder, making this a little lower, or it's like he really sang loud on that one, so it's kind of it's clipping, like there's a bunch of distortion on it, so now I got to go declip everything, and just like all those things that just don't sound annoying or like offensive when you're listening to it. So that's just going through all that. And you got to go through bar by bar and sort of, you know, making sure that there wasn't a huge noise that popped through the microphone at that point. And you just, you know, you want to comb through all those things. So that's what I'm at now.
And I guess you would have to maybe edit the start and end of songs of like how they flow.
So you fade in and
other.
fade out, right? So you just got to pick those moments of how, and then you want to automate with the mixing side. You want to automate for parts where the, you know, crowd singing along to a lot of things. You want to push those mics forward, right? And then, you know, you want to bring them back when you're in the bigger moments, because of, you know, just the way phase cancellation works, stuff like that. So it's a lot of trickery there and a lot of volume automation back and forth. But yeah, it's cool. There's so many good moments, and you get to see the reaction of songs, right? You know, the whole, like all of One Thing, pretty much Scott's drowned out because they're singing the entire song. And at that point, you just leave all those mics active the whole time.
And how did you choose which of the hits would make this greatest hits album? Because, you know, most bands never have a hit, or they don't have enough hits to make a greatest hits.
Even just to have a greatest hits is
nuts, and with Finger 11, I mean, I was at that show and I know all the albums and all the songs. And if you guys actually have more hits than you can put on a greatest hits album. So if you guys have, say, 20 hits, you played about 18 of them, almost all of them. How do you choose? I guess it has to flow as a show as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the decision was mainly for like vinyl, and there's only so much time you could put on, and, you know, whatever it was. So it's like, those are the songs that you got to put on, right? You got to put on 12 or 13 as opposed to 17 of them. So to choose the songs was actually quite comical, because again, the guys being so humble that they're like, if management or people are tossing around some song titles, and they're like, I don't know about that one. And we're like, why? It was like number one. That's called a hit. You could put it on there because, you know what I mean? It's a hit. You have a bunch of them. And they're like, yeah, it was a hit. It's like, that did well. It's like, yeah. And then you show the numbers. It's like, they're like, oh shit, I guess it did do well. Like, again, like that's how humble these guys are, that they don't care about that stuff. And they it was kind of cool. They deferred to me for a lot of things. So like, I'm like, guys, if I'm a fan, that song better be on there. Like, I better see that song on the greatest hits, because I'm a fan. I'd be disappointed if that didn't make it on there. Right. And that's how it kind of got picked. So it was like, it went back and forth for a while, for like months, trying to pick. And I remember they were saying, it was this funny comment. We were all on a conference call. I forgot who in the band had said it. It could have been Rick. And it's like, oh, is it weird that, like, you know, we have like, you know, One Thing and then like, you know, Drag You Down, or it's like, it's heavy and like soft. I'm like, dude, like, congratulations, you wrote like hits in every genre. Like, you know what I mean? Like, not only can people not even, most people do not have a greatest hits. You have a greatest hits with like pop rock, top 40. Like, you have hits
acoustic,
everywhere. Like, yeah, exactly. So it's, to them, they're like, oh, is that going to be, a journey for the listener? I'm like, dude, like, that's incredible that you even have that problem. You know what I mean? Like, so it was me saying on the call, being like, guys, that's kind of like that's an incredible accomplishment. Like, I would say, like, own that. You got to own that, because not everybody has that. And that's, and then eventually it was like the song order. It's like, okay, now we have the songs picked. What's the order? And really, there's no right or wrong order. When it's the greatest hits, they're all great songs. It's just picking for vinyl, I guess, like which sides or whatever.
Yeah, you talking right now reminded me that when I did the interviews with the other two members, that every time I drop stats of like, oh, that went to number one, that broke this record, this was on the charts for this long, this time's multi-platinum.
Yeah.
Both guys were like, oh, that's the first time I hear this.
Yeah,
like, basically, they said they never pay attention to charts and stats.
I'm telling you, and that's not a lie. I know, like, a lot of people like, oh, like, really, like, I'm that famous, and but they do know behind closed doors. These guys generally don't know those things. They don't care. They just, once the song is out, it's not theirs anymore. It's the fans, and let them enjoy it. And that's how they carry themselves with everything. It's pretty admirable.
And when I, at the end of, when I end a part with Finger 11 and go into something else, a different subject, I would do like a wrap up of like, okay, let me just in a nutshell give you what you accomplished in your career. And both guys were like, wow, I guess we've actually done some cool stuff. Like they were hearing like their obituary, like for the, their biography for the first time, which was cool. Yeah. So is there a timeline at all for the greatest hits album? Like it doesn't have to land at that time, but do you have a vision for when you would like this to come out, or
I think everybody I mean, there's always like what the band hopes for, and then what the reality is of, with there's a bunch of people involved, and fitting into the right time of release for labels and stuff like that. I mean, I'd say next year is a pretty safe bet in 2023, hopefully, mid-year, something like that. So it'll definitely be out hopefully in first half of next year at some point, hopefully, right? That's what we're aiming for.
And there was somebody else at that Ottawa show that made sure you guys sounded as good as possible. So you had Jordan that was focused specifically on the drums, but then you had the sonic scientist, Dan Preston out front. So he was the front of house sound tech. Is that correct? Yes.
Yep.
So Dan is a monster, working with all these amazing artists as well. And this is what Dan has to say. He says, Steve is a beast. One of the most multilateral, good word, dudes in the industry. I have a high appreciation for people in this industry that cover so many bases and do it all very well. Steve is one of those guys. He lives and breathes music. He's been a true champion of me as well, and that respect is definitely shared. Love working with him and the whole Finger 11 camp. So that's from Dan Preston.
Awesome. Yeah, Dan. Listen, we can only do so much on stage. That's the person that makes it translate out there, right? So they're sort of in charge. They're the last line of defense between rehearsing, the way we look on stage, the way we perform, the way we play. That's our last line of defense between us and the fans. It's got to go through that one final person, right? And Dan, I've been the biggest fan of Dan since I've seen him with other bands, but there's always that after shows, people are like, oh, great show. But every time Dan's on the gig, it's always like, great show. You guys sounded phenomenal. That's the best I've ever heard you guys in years. And it was like this common thread of like, oh yeah, every time somebody says that's because Dan's, it's like Dan's. And again, me being the guy that cares about the entire thing, right? Like from the production standpoint to the track listing and stuff like that live, that's important to me. I need to know that what we're doing is translating out there. And I need to make sure that happens time and time again. So anytime it's like, hey, we got a tour coming up, or we got a show coming up, it's like right away I'm like in the group chat, it's like, go get Dan Preston, make sure he's number one. He's always one for me, right? And it's not to knock whoever, we've been with a ton of guys who are incredible. I don't know, Dan. I think Dan gets the band really well, but I also think we got a good relationship too, and he works his ass off, that guy. Like anything we need, he's always looking to improve himself every show too. It's not like one of those guys that's like, yeah, I got it, I can handle it, and then it stops there. Dan's every day, like we share, I just bought this new plugin, I'm going to try to use this live on like, kick drum and, shit like that. And he's great. He's awesome. So I love having him. The whole band loves having him on board.
I was going to say, you must connect with him as him being a studio audio guy as well.
And he's also a ridiculous guitar player.
Yeah, the playing with Clark Nova, and I see him post 15-second videos online of him just playing. Yeah, and man, this guy shreds. Like,
he's crazy good. Yeah,
it's unreal.
And what you can appreciate is people understanding their role as well when they're put into a situation. When Dan comes, Dan's not Dan the Shredder on guitar. We all know, like we all know that we see videos. He comes as like, hey, I'm the guy that's going to make you guys sound awesome tonight, and he plays that role and he plays it so well. And yeah, there's I can't say enough about Dan.
So final Finger 11 question here.
Yep.
Rumor has it you guys are working on a new album. What can you, so we have a lot of Finger 11 fans that check out this podcast. Both the Rick and Rich episodes are two of the most downloaded episodes of all time for the podcast.
Yeah.
What info can you divulge for the Finger 11 fans that can't wait for new music? Anything you can give us about the new album?
Yeah, so
we'll take anything.
There will be a new single next year, for sure. I can't divulge too much information, but it has already been recorded.
Ooh.
And, yep. And we're just waiting for the time to do it. Like I mentioned earlier, we'd done these cottage trips right before the pandemic and during, and basically writing a bunch of songs. It's not like, yeah, they've been a band for so many years, but there's the amount of gas left in the tank to not just play live and tour, to create new Finger 11 songs. That's what I loved about being in the band. Because if it was just, and I'll be honest, if it was just the band saying like, hey, we just need a guy to basically jump for the next 10 years and we don't care about new music, I don't know if I stay. Maybe I do, because I love the guy so much, but that kept me going, was like, I love that part. And the fact that I know I'm going to be able to get to be a part of it one day, as a songwriter and also help out with the production of things. And then we started writing a few years ago, and I was like, holy shit, like these are some solid tracks. Like these guys care. Like, it's not just like, yeah, we got to put out a single because we probably should. I mean, let's face it, there's a reason why they don't put out albums every year, 2 years. They could, because there's a ton of ideas always, but they want to make sure what they're putting out is their best work. And you got to appreciate that, right? As long as they take between, there's a reason for that. They care about what they're putting out. There's a reason why there's a greatest hits album, is because they gave a shit every album to put some incredible songs on there. So we started working on a bunch of songs, and there was one in particular that we were all happy about and excited about, and started recording it. And so that's there's a bunch of songs. It's not just that song. There's going to be more that hopefully get rolled out through the next couple of years. So yeah, next year I would say a Finger 11 fan can be expecting a new single.
It's 2023 is going to be a good year for Finger 11 fans. Looks like they'll be able to catch you guys on the road at different points. New single, possibly new album with new material, possibly the greatest hits live album. Man, it might be the best year ever for Finger 11 fans.
We're all excited about it. So
I have a question sent in from a fan, but this fan actually has history with Finger 11. This fan has actually worked on a couple Finger 11 music videos and promo material. So this is from Rich Meisner. Hopefully I'm saying the name right. Okay,
can I guess is it a question or is it a comment?
It's basically a question comment, but you're probably going to say it. Do you want me to say it, or you're going to guess?
I'll guess it.
Go ahead.
Does it have anything to do with getting a haircut?
Rich Meisner says, please ask him about his hair. The guy always has a fresh haircut. So it's kind of more of a joke than a question, but
yesterday morning. Let him know I got one cut yesterday morning.
Wanted to look handsome for the show. The podcast interview. That's awesome. Yeah, so I had to include that from Rich because I thought that was funny. So as we wrap up here, we've done over 2 hours. I like to end with a little rapid fire question section. So because we do have a time crunch, because you're off to a practice, or not a practice, up to sound check. So rapid fire, quick answers, and we'll go from there. Sounds good?
Yep.
All right. What would you be doing if you didn't become a musician?
Professional golfer. I would try for it. Yeah.
Do your kids think their dad is a rock star or just some schmuck at home?
They definitely don't think I'm a rock star. I'm the kid. I'm the guy that just plays hide and seek with them and drops them off at school and watches Frozen or Enchanted with them. But my 4-year-old Evelyn loves the songs that I write and produce, and she knows a bunch of the lyrics. And she's always telling me to put certain songs on. You can tell which ones are her favorites, by the way. It's always like, Daddy, put on this song. Daddy, put on this song. And there's always like that handful of songs that she always grabs. So that it's like the best, field test to know which songs are going to work.
Does she like the song Criminal from Eric? Is it Punzo? How do you say the last name?
Does. She likes Criminal, Nauseous from Eric, and also she loves the new track I'd actually just put out with a band called New Friends, called Ricochet. I think she's heard that about 1,000 times now.
She might have the golden producer ear. She could be like the next A&R or the next producer.
You never know.
That's the early training like you got with your dad on the drums. Did you ever get to a point where you seriously considered quitting music? You touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like there's, man, I can't count how many times. There's always that question of like, am I good enough for this? Then you're busy and you're making money, you're making a career, but then it's like, now you get married, right? So it's like all of a sudden, like now it's like, okay, well now we have, we want to start a family. So at that point you start thinking, I'm like, yeah, like, should I be doing something else? I'm in Finger 11, I'm doing this thing, and I hope this turns into something else. And then after that, that was the last time I guess I was like, maybe like, 30 years old. I'd ever asked that. But every time I asked that, I was kind of like, no, you idiot. Like, yeah, you're fine. But when you're younger, yeah, you run into that question in your mind a lot.
Who would you say are your all-time favorite artists and albums?
All-time favorite artists. Let's see. Freddie Mercury is probably number one for me. The Beatles, obviously. Let's see. The Cure. Really love The Cure. But for artists, man, like, again, they range. Like I have, you think, let's see, Phil Collins. Love Phil Collins. Always loved Phil Collins. I know Scott and I share that. And yeah, I'd say those ones. And again, like then the albums is Make Yourself, White Pony, the Phil Collins Greatest Hit album, very good. Again, The Cure, The Smiths. And then in the pop world, it's like Bruno Mars, phenomenal, right? He's that's one guy I wish I got to see live. And I
so talented.
Yeah.
Can play all the instruments, can sing, can dance, can songwrite. Yeah. Which musician or band were you the biggest fan of before sharing a bill with them with Finger 11?
Oh shit, that's a good question. Alice in Chains.
Whoa.
Yeah, wild.
Where was that?
Minnesota. I think it was back-to-back nights we had done. And holy shit, man, Jerry Cantrell. Like
guitar wizard.
Oh my God. And James and I were just watching. It's like side stage. We're just like, both of us in awe. We're like, this guy doesn't miss. Like, and what's cool about Jerry Cantrell is you think after like 25 years of playing, Man in the Box, you get bored and maybe do your own thing. He plays it exactly like it was released. Nothing is different. The guitar tone's the same. The parts are the same. Everything is exactly the same. And then you go back and search on YouTube for like the last couple of decades, and every night is the exact same, every single song. And you got to respect that. Because again, it's for the fans. If I'm going to listen for the first time, like I did that night that we played with them, I want to see, wood being played exactly how I remember it. And that's what they did. So I'd say Alice in Chains.
What's also great about Jerry Cantrell is he sings a lot, providing those harmonies that are kind of the unique thing about Alice in Chains is
he sings. I mean, in a musical sense, he's always singing the fourth, which is a very uncommon note center to sort of sing when you're singing harmonies.
Yeah.
Typically it's always like the third or the fifth, or but that's what made that so unique and so special. And what a voice that guy's got.
Yeah. So Stained is one of my all-time favorite bands, and Stained's basically favorite band is Alice in Chains. So in Stained music, you can hear that weird fourth harmony a lot as well.
Yeah,
So
for
you
sure.
can hear
A lot of bands for sure were inspired by that band.
What's the best live concert you've ever seen, period? So not one that, you were on the bill with Finger 11, just
right.
Is there a concert that stood out as the best show you've ever seen?
Oh man, shit, that's a tough one. Best concert I've ever seen. I'd say Foo Fighters at the Rogers Center was I mean, there's probably a bunch that I'm that I'm missing, but that one, because it was at the Rogers Center, like anytime you could play like in front of like 45,000 people, right? I guess just because it was like how big the venue was and how much, how they filled the stadium up and had everybody like in the palm of his hands, like girls nuts, man. So that was that, and we were like, I think like 10 rows, like standing right there. It was pretty awesome.
If you could sit down with anyone for a conversation, who would it be and why?
Can I say Dave Grohl again? just because he seems like he's the coolest guy. But no, I like, it would be like a producer, like say Butch Vig, just to know like in those sessions, like what went on, not just for Nevermind and anything. It's like, yeah, that would be an awesome conversation.
Just a couple episodes ago, I had Canadian Idol winner Brian Mello from Hamilton, and his choice for who you could sit down with was Dave Grohl as well. So
yeah,
so many good choice.
That's always their answer. Yeah, just because he seems like a super cool guy to hang with.
If you found yourself on death row, obviously falsely accused, you didn't do it, but you're on death row, you get one final death row meal. What is it going to be? You could add a drink to it. You can have a dessert. This is your last meal, man. You can go all out. There's no calories. Calories don't matter. What do you choose? You're sushi. Italian. I mean, sushi. That's not the answer I thought from
nobody. And it always throws people for a loop. They're like, you're Italian. It's like sushi, for sure. Always.
Sushi. All right. Last rapid fire question. When you find yourself in a rut where, you're not feeling great, maybe the mental health, negative thoughts coming in, what do you do to snap out of it as quickly as possible?
Hang with the kids, hang with the wife. I can say that now, whereas before it wasn't like that. Before it was like, I don't know, like, you try and go out or, go for beers, go with buddies or something like that, but that always doesn't work. So, but now I guess since having, wife and kids, that's the easiest one. It's like, you don't have a good day, doesn't matter what happens, man. You go home and your kids, run to you to say hi. It's like, that kind of fixes everything.
So in every interview at the end, I ask the guest if they can provide a question for the podcast that I'm going to ask the next guest without them knowing who the guest is, how old they are, male or female, what profession they're in, just a general question. You can have fun with it. It could be serious. It could be funny. And the last guest provided this question for you without knowing who the guest was going to be, which is funny because it's actually Jordan Gauthier who did your drums. But he, without knowing it was you, his question is, do you have a pivotal moment where you realized that you had achieved a level of mastery at your craft? I guess the Arnold Lanny moment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think it was that moment where it wasn't like a family member or a friend that acknowledged your talent or ability, right? I guess this is twofold. It's like, it was Arnold. It was somebody who was incredibly successful already in the business, who unlocked almost every achievement you can, that put a stamp of approval on it, right? So it was that. And then I think it was the joining Finger 11 moment, right? It was like, again, same deal. Like, now these are artists, not a producer that's doing it. These are artists that have been successful, and kind of getting their stamp of approval and being like, yeah, you're the guy. I guess I think it was that being like, okay, this is more of like big leagues, right? This is where I belong, and I'm gonna, do my best to stay here.
And now, what question are you going to provide for the guest that I have coming up next without knowing what it is?
So it's kind of not really similar, but I guess it could be, have you done everything that you've sort of set out to do? Do you feel like you're actually on the path where you can achieve that at this point in your career?
So ask them if they've already done everything they've set out to do, or if they're on that path.
If they're so you have a goal, yep. Right? And sometimes the goalposts move, and I realize that while you're as you're getting older, and I guess the question is, has that goal and that dream remained the same, or have you altered it a bit?
Perfect. All right. Now, what's cool is I actually know who the next guest is, and I have Papa Roach drummer Dave Buckner, which is pretty cool. Another drummer. Awesome. And an iconic band that, they've been going for over 20 years and sold 2 million albums. Yeah. So that'll be cool to be able to say this actually comes from the Finger 11 drummer. So that's a cool thread going through the podcast. So final 2 questions and we're done. When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of and what are you most grateful for?
So in life, most grateful for, my support group, like my family. I have incredible parents. My relationship with my brother. Most of the reason what I'm able to do in the music business is because my brother sort of like, busted down a few doors to meet the right people that ended up being long-time relations for me. So like my family, my wife, who's incredibly supportive, she's incredible. She takes care of literally everything outside of this room she takes care of everything there. So I'm supportive of her, grateful for that. My kids, obviously, I have incredible in-laws, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, like honestly, my family, I have incredible friends, very grateful for that. And also on the career side, I guess the thing that I'm most proud of, has nothing to do with really any of the achievements. It's how long I've been able to keep relationships with good people, right? So like I've had some of my relationships that stem from for 15, 20 years now with the same core people that I still work with today. I think I'm most proud of that I've been able to keep the circle of really, really, really great people. And I've been able to keep that, those relationships alive.
If you could go back in time and sit down next to your 10-year-old self, so taking your lifetime of lessons and mentorship and training and achievements and heartbreak and all these different things, what advice do you give cute little 10-year-old Steve sitting there to help him navigate this life moving forward?
I think I wish somebody told me how to learn how to deal with being told like no a lot, get over it a lot quicker, right? Everybody's super impressionable, and it's like when you submit songs, it's like to a manager or to a label, it's like, this isn't very good. It's like, man, when you're young, or like, say at 10 with hockey, it's like you had a bad game, it's like shit, like that ruins your entire week, right? And I wish somebody told me how insignificant really that is in the grand scheme of things, right? And to not really give everything so much attention and so much weight, because we hang on to things for far too long, way longer than we should. That determines how we sort of like live out our day, our week, our month, or year. So I would say I wish I knew how insignificant those things were that we thought was like the end of the world, and it's nothing. It's a blip.
And for our listeners that have stuck with us for the last 2+ hours, where can they go online if they want to stay in the loop with what you're up to. If they want to find out more information about you, if they want to maybe reach out and say, hey, I loved the podcast, or I was at this show and I loved you playing with Finger 11, or they want to use your services as a songwriter, producer, drummer, where do they go? Website or social media?
I have a website, stevemomusic.com, I think. But if you search Steve Mo or Steve Molella, like the website will come up. And Instagram, it's Steve__Mo. And they can
double underscore, very important.
Double underscore. Yep. On Instagram. Yeah. Yep. And I always talk to a bunch of, fans, other artists, everybody on there.
Perfect. So as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a producer, as a songwriter, as a drummer. I want to acknowledge you for providing a safe, supportive, professional environment for musicians to come in and work with you, where you're helping them live out their dreams by working on their music, by recording. You give them a platform to actually get out there and do what they're here to do. I want to thank you as a Finger 11 fan for giving life to the band for the last 10 years. If they don't find the right drummer, who knows, maybe the band doesn't continue. So thank you for continuing the legacy of Finger 11 for the last 11 years. I'm really excited to hear the new music that's coming out. So thank you in advance for the new creations that are on their way. And last but not least, I want to thank you personally as a fan for sitting down with me for the last 2 hours, for allowing me to pick your brain and for answering questions that I wanted to know for a long time. So thank you a lot, Steve.
And this was awesome. You're a total pro, man. This is amazing. I could have, honestly, if it wasn't for Soundcheck, I could have talked for another 2 hours.
Busy man. We'll have to do round 2. Maybe next year when something gets released, we'll bring you back on. Yep. All right, brother. Thank you so much. Have a great show tonight. And to the fans, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is, who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.